Hey, M&A scientists. Let's talk about one of the biggest time and cost sinks in deal making, contract review. Every deal comes with a mountain of contracts, employment agreements, customer contracts, vendor contracts, you name it. Buried within those hundreds of pages are crucial details like change of control provisions, consent clauses. Those are the things you need to get ahead of. Traditionally, combing through these contracts takes hours, sometimes hundreds of hours. But what if we could reduce that time by 80%? With Dealroom AI, you can. Our AI-powered contract analysis tool scans and extracts key information from all your contracts in minutes. No more spending countless hours hunting for risks. Dealroom AI highlights critical clauses instantly. And here's the best part. It's incredibly easy to use. No special training, no steep learning curves, just upload your contracts and let Dealroom AI do the heavy lifting. Think about the legal fees you'll save and the efficiency you'll gain. Plus, computers tend to miss less than humans, so you can trust you're catching every important detail. If you're ready to revolutionize your contract review process, check out Dealroom AI. Because in M&A, time is money. We're here to save you both. Visit dealroom.net to learn more. Here's to the deal. Hello, M&A scientists. Welcome to the M&A Science Podcast, where we learn from the best in M&A to uncover proven techniques for enterprise value creation. If you're interested in learning more about how to optimize your M&A practice or want to get involved with our community of forward-thinking M&A practitioners, visit mascience.com and subscribe to our free weekly newsletter. If you want to keep up with us on the go, head over to LinkedIn and follow M&A Science. I'm your host, Kisam Patel, founder and CEO at Dealroom and chief scientist at M&A Science. Joining me today is Jeff Giles, EVP of Corporate Development at Core & Main, where he leads M&A, strategic planning, and inorganic growth initiatives. Jeff brings deep expertise in executing high-volume M&A and has worked in several leadership positions at Barry Waymiller and Bertram Capital. If you're not familiar with Core & Main, they're a leading specialty distributor dedicated to advancing reliable infrastructure with local service nationwide, traded on NYSE under CNM. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into Jeff's experience managing high-volume, buyer-led M&A and explore the strategies, processes, and tools that help drive successful acquisitions. Jeff, how you doing today?
Spectacular, Kisan. After that free lunch, how could I not be doing well?
Hey, thanks for taking time to taking a break from doing deals to have this conversation. We're here live in just outside of St. Louis in headquarters, Core & Main Global Headquarters.
The world HQ of Core & Main, live and in the flesh.
Where it all happens. Can we kick things off a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So hard to believe, but in this coming March, it will be 7 years with Core & Main, which has flown by. It's been an absolutely remarkable run. Loved every minute of it. We've been incredibly busy on the acquisition front. A lot of activity in both our core markets and some adjacencies that we've grown into. And as I said, it's been a ton of fun, and we've got a lot of runway ahead.
You've been doing deals for a while, even before Core & Main.
Yeah. So, my career journey is probably a little bit non-traditional. Started post-MBA career at Emerson Electric, another great St. Louis company. I know you know some of the Emerson folks.
Yeah, we're just there yesterday.
Yeah, no, fantastic company, great leadership, great track record, and really a great proving ground and training organization. So I was fortunate to begin my post-MBA career there, focus on business development and strategic planning. Had a little bit of exposure to some joint ventures and partnerships, not really M&A so much, but really good experience there. Ultimately, at the time, was looking for something a little more entrepreneurial. Ended up getting into private equity, most recently with a firm called Bertram Capital that you mentioned. Great middle market fund based out on the West Coast. I was the first hire in their business development organization, really hired to build that out and grow it nationally, build that Bertram brand and help generate deal flow. The firm was founded by a fantastic guy named Jeff Drazen, who was a 20-plus year venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. Had great relationships throughout the investor base there, some really strong LPs, and pretty quickly raised a $350 million fund back in 2007. Hired some really great people to do the execution work, and they sat back and said, well, where the heck are all the deals? And Jeff and I met, and he asked me to come on board and really build out that business development function, which I did. I was there, it was about 6 years, I believe. Had a remarkable run. Had the opportunity to get involved with other aspects of the business along the way as well. But that was really my first foray into sort of the deal business, if you will. Following Bertram, joined another great St. Louis company, Barry Waymiller, and led by Bob Chapman and Kyle Chapman, who are still very dear friends. Just couldn't speak more highly of the firm that they built, the culture, the focus on really valuing the people in the organization. It's a remarkable, not only growth story, but an example of how you can treat people the right way and the impact that has on their lives, the impact it has on the business. And Bob's goal is really to build a better world through business. And that all really comes down to, quite simply, valuing the people in your care, treating them like people, not like human resources, right? And giving them, we like to call responsible freedom to do their job, execute, and perform. It's a fantastic organization. Candidly, I never thought I would leave there until I met our CEO, Steve LeClaire. Happens to be another wonderful human being, incredibly down to earth, yet also an incredibly successful CEO of Core & Main, $7+ billion company. And Steve and I got connected back in, I guess it was initially July of 2017. We had somewhat of a longer courtship period as I sort of pondered the opportunity in front of me. I never thought I would leave Barry Waymiller, just given the role that I had there, leading corporate development, working really to bring in a lot of family-owned businesses, some corporate carve-outs, and again, focusing on really creating a culture where people truly feel valued. It was very gratifying for me and fulfilling. Ultimately, I obviously did, decide to make the change, join Core & Main in March of 18. Since then, we've been incredibly acquisitive, have completed over 40 acquisitions, deployed over $1.7 billion in capital into M&A over that time frame. So yeah, it's been quite a run.
Got involved with some really good platforms, and rumor going around that Bob and Kyle Chapman are coming to the podcast. I can neither confirm nor deny, but
that's a good get right there. Quality guests.
But it's good to take some of the learnings that we'll drive in this podcast. How many deals have you worked on?
In my career, 60 plus that I've really been directly involved with, and for the most part have led. Certainly, had my hand in others over the years at various organizations, but a significant number at Barry Waymiller, where I was able to really lead the process from start to finish, and then Core & Main, certainly with the great team that I've got working with me. We've been the most active acquirer in our industry, both in our core markets and some of the adjacent markets. And again, we've got a great runway ahead of us. That's
why I had to chase you down. I was like, Jeff, I'm coming in town, and every time I go on LinkedIn, there's a new announcement. There's another deal that you announced, and I had to figure out, what are you doing?
Yeah, we're blocking and tackling, and we're just making it happen.
Can you tell me a little bit, I'm just curious about the platforms you previously were on. Really good experience, and I learned a lot about them, their approach, the culture aspect. How has that shaped your approach when it comes to corporate development at Core & Main?
Yeah, it's a great question. And honestly, one of the reasons why it was such a tough decision for me to leave Barry Waymiller, just given the relationships that I'd built internally, the culture of the organization, the growth plans they had in place, everything about it. I mean, it honestly really a dream job. And I made very sure early on when I was assessing the opportunity with Core & Main to ensure that the leadership team here was going to be aligned with that approach, and that I could have some influence on making sure that we were doing things the right way. We were initially private equity backed when I joined. CD&R, Clayton, Dublier & Rice out of New York. They were fantastic partners for us. They were very supportive of our growth. They've got a solid reputation as being a firm that's really investing in businesses, investing in growth, supporting M&A, supporting other strategic initiatives, as opposed to simply just slashing and burning, cutting costs. We did not want to be known as a firm that buys companies, lays people off, and generates returns through that means. We want to invest in people. We want to make sure the people that join us through whatever means, but my focus being on acquisitions, we want to make sure that for every person that joins our organization, they feel welcome, they feel valued, they see the opportunity ahead of them, and feel like they truly have joined a family-focused organization. And I think we've done a remarkable job building that here at Core & Main. So that's been incredibly rewarding. At the end of the day, it all comes down to people, right? I mean, when we're working with business owners, leadership teams, the most important thing that we see early on is, are they going to be a strong cultural fit for us? Absent that, doesn't really matter how it looks on paper, what the model says. If you don't have that cultural piece right, it's not likely going to be a fit, and it's not likely going to be a great investment.
What's buyer-led M&A mean to you?
I would say it really means being very proactive in relationship development early on. One of the first things that we did as a team when I joined was said, look, we need to understand what the opportunity set is in front of us. So we performed a very large and detailed market mapping exercise in our core, and then ultimately in some adjacent markets that we have performed some research on and ultimately grown into. But really, you need to understand what the lay of the land is. You need to know the landscape, who the players are, that very long tail of companies that are operating in all the geographies where we want to grow. So we've got a 400 plus page deck that we update relatively frequently, so we know at any given time who the key players are in all of our priority geographies and really all across the US and now even into Canada. So that's first and foremost, right? You have to understand what the opportunity set is. You have to know who the players are. And then you can start to prioritize. You can start to develop relationships, identify business owners that maybe are closer to a retirement phase, don't have a succession plan in place. People, obviously, as I said, where there's going to be a strong fit with the culture. And then we just start developing relationships. I mentioned we've done 40 plus acquisitions in the last almost 7 years since I've been here, and actually did one acquisition before I joined. And the vast majority of those were outside of a formal investment banking process. They were really built on a one-on-one relationship that someone in our organization, whether it was me or I've got a phenomenal team member, Noel Mock, who is 100% focused on deal origination, and he does a tremendous job of developing relationships, planting seeds, and bringing people to the table when the time is right. And we've almost got this network effect, if you will. I mean, given the level of activity that we've had business owners approach us directly saying, hey, look, don't forget about us, kind of raising their hand like we want to be involved in that party too. And we've acquired businesses that directly reached out to us, which I consider to be a dream scenario, right? You've got the vast difference between what we're doing and I'm going to compare and contrast with sort of a generalist private equity firm, and clearly nothing against that model. There's a real need for private equity, I believe, in the industry, and they do a lot of great things. But it's very hard for them to differentiate their message when they're talking directly to business owners. They may have a very strong investment thesis. They may have done a platform in a specific industry, and they can articulate that experience and that knowledge base, but they're not going to be as deep as a committed strategic like us. And they're not going to have the same long-term strategy that we have, right? Their day one plan is, how do we prepare this for exit in 3 to 5 years? So we come in with a very different approach, and our message truly resonates with business owners and leadership teams that are worried about their people, their legacy, and what the business performs like over the long term.
So I got a few stages here. 1, building the market map. 2, prioritizing those companies in the market map. 3, building these relationships. Then 4, the real pitch and why to do the deal. Does that sound like a good framework for us to break down?
Absolutely. That's pretty spot on.
All right. Let's start with market map, because you mentioned a couple things with market map. One was looking at what's really core for your business, and then adjacencies. I want to understand that a little more, because I even think about our own business. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but there's not a huge market when we look at M&A tools. I mean, it's
right.
Sort of, and we kind of build all this capability in our own platform. But then when you look at adjacency, I'm trying to understand is like, how far is too adjacent? How do you sort of draw the line and keep it relevant without going too far left field? And what's your thought process around building that market map just to keep it in a scope that's reasonable for you to go do deals and not get spread too thin?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that I know companies struggle with when they look at growing into adjacent markets, and the way we looked at is really very clearly defining what our core markets are. And primarily that's in the waterworks industry, right? So we're a specialty distributor of primarily water infrastructure products, pipes, valves, fittings, hydrants, other ancillary tools and products. We've got a good-sized fire protection business that does fire sprinkler fabrication as well as distribution of supply products, loose supply. And we've advanced and grown into geosynthetics and erosion control, natural gas, and some concrete structures as a few examples. And really, the work that we performed to get into those adjacent markets really started with a clear definition of the core, who the customer base is, right? Who the supplier base is, and do we have opportunities to take products that we already have relationships with existing suppliers and sell those into new markets. We also look for the opportunity to sell existing customers with products that we can gain access to through this entrance into these adjacent markets. That's been a big focus for us. If you think about geosynthetics and erosion control as an example, when we really started identifying what that market looks like, it's a highly fragmented market, which is key. It's focused on infrastructure development, right? And virtually any product that we sell into a large project, the ground will be disrupted, pipes going in the ground. They need some type of geosynthetic or erosion control product on that same exact project where we're already selling product into. So it's not always the same customer exactly, but it's the same project, right? So us getting on site early, which we generally do, but just due to our business model and the relationships we have, that should put us in a really good position to sell those ancillary products in adjacent markets. So Geo's been a good success there. We're continuing to build that out. Concrete structures is the same. We've done a couple acquisitions there where you've got these large projects and they need, whether it's a catch basin or a manhole or even a retaining wall. And then there's going to be the whole suite of pipes, valves, fittings that are going to be sold in that same project. So it gives us a more comprehensive product basket to sell into that project. And again, it's not always the same customer on each of those different aspects of the project, but the project's the same, right? So it's about us understanding who the key players are, getting on site early, and again, looking into these adjacent markets that aren't completely far afield. Natural gas is another one that sounds like it could be a little bit more far afield than some of the others I mentioned. We bought a couple businesses that are primarily serving the natural gas end market, but they're with very similar products to what we're selling in waterworks. There's some fabrication capabilities that they have that are incredibly similar to what we're doing both in our fire fabrication and some of our waterworks fusible product fabrication. So similar type approach to fabrication. This is not manufacturing. It is true assembly or fabrication. And the capabilities, very similar. And again, serving critical infrastructure markets. At the outset here, when you talked about who Core & Main is, we've evolved to become more than just a waterworks player. We are focused on products serving critical infrastructure industries, and we think that's a pretty good place to be for now and the foreseeable future.
It sounds like a key step is to hypothesize synergies when you're starting to expand into these adjacencies. That there's something there. You're not just picking it to pick it, but we can hypothesize that either customers are going to be able to cross-sell this solution to the same customer base, or we got a supplier network that we can leverage and be able to distribute that way. Does that sound right?
That sounds right. Yeah. And then, if we can sell new products to existing customers, that's another area where there's a real benefit too. And given our size and scale, for the most part, we've got access to the premier product lines in all the markets that we're serving. But in some where there's exclusive distribution rights, and we've been able to access those through acquisition, buying companies that have some of these exclusive rights to companies or suppliers that we want to get into. So that's another area that we look at for growth as well.
What about the stuff like the natural gas example? Like that doesn't seem very obvious. Like how do you put two and two together to come up with that?
Yeah, exactly. So again, looking at large fragmented markets with highly specified products focused primarily on critical infrastructure where distribution has value, where there's not a lot of direct from sort of OEM direct sales to the customer base. That's our business model. We know that as well as anyone in the industry. The companies that we've acquired in that space really fit that bill nicely. And while they're not necessarily focused on the same customer base, it's the same product type, and in some cases the exact same product or equipment or tools. And it's sort of a multi-utility strategy where we've been able to kind of tap into that outside of pure waterworks and say some of these products, whether it's our fusible piping or the machinery that we sell or rent that goes along with that serves a variety of different end markets. So it's just an extension of our existing business. And I mentioned the fabrication capabilities sort of mirroring what we already do. So we've got that capability in-house. It's just a slightly different product and going to a different end market, but we know how to run a fab shop. And again, as we look to grow the business, increasing our TAM, our total addressable market, continues to be a goal, right? We think our existing core markets are still incredibly fragmented, plenty of opportunity ahead of us, but we also don't want to stand still. We want to continue to grow into other markets where we think there's additional growth opportunity in the future, where we think the demand characteristics can help balance out maybe some of the ebbs and flows in our core. And again, where there's a large universe of acquisition targets out there because it's fragmented, and we can continue to roll that up like we've been doing in the core markets.
So different end customers, but what you're recognizing is the commonalities in the distribution pattern of how you would ultimately sell.
That's right.
It's fun stuff.
Indeed it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's helpful. So that helps to really build out the market map in a way that's ties to a real strategy and rationale for doing it, and that you're not just putting things in there or declaring adjacencies for the sake of declaring it. So once we do that, then the prioritization part, how do we prioritize so we're not trying to boil the ocean now?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So we're always going to prioritize our core markets, and we've been incredibly acquisitive across the board, both in the core markets and adjacent markets. This year, what we've closed already, it'll make it a record year for M&A. We acquired a large waterworks business, Dana Kepner, that had been private equity backed. It's a fantastic business, very similar culture to ours. It's fitting in very nicely, and it filled in some really solid gaps in the market from a geographic standpoint, which is really, from a top level strategy, kind of the easiest and most desirable way to grow, right? I mean, we have 350 plus branches across the country today. But even with that level of presence, there are still geographies where we could use some more dots on the map, where we can look to gain market share, whether that's through greenfields, through hiring, or obviously through M&A. So that it goes back to that market mapping exercise that we talked about, where we literally have a map, right, by every district, deeper than the state level, right, where we can look at and see that long tail of suppliers that are selling products into our end markets. And in some cases, when you get to sort of the long end of the tail, it's companies that are selling HVAC, plumbing products in addition to waterworks, right? And so that may not be the most attractive acquisition target for us, but we've been successful in buying companies that have had a mixture of products, and that's part of the way you can look at growing into adjacent markets as well. But our core market focus is always going to be the priority. And again, just given the high level of fragmentation, the number of, whether it's a mom and pop or multi-branch operation or even a regional player that's got 5 to 15 branches, it is a fragmented market, and there is no shortage of demand and need in North America. And we're primarily U.S. We just did our first acquisition in Canada, but water infrastructure needs are tremendous, and we are as well positioned, if not more well positioned than anyone in the industry to serve that need.
Still don't tell me how to prioritize it. Do you have like a scoring system? Like how do you really, you kind of gave me the case of why there's so many opportunities.
Yeah, well, the point really was the core markets are going to be the prioritization. So waterworks, fire protection, waterworks is the biggest part of our business by far, right? So that's going to be the prioritization from that and the other adjacent markets, right? And then we look at very granularly which regions are growing where we don't have the appropriate level of market share that we think we should have. That's really the easiest way to prioritize, right? Is filling in geographic dots on the map in high priority geographies where you've got population growth, you've got water infrastructure needs, wastewater infrastructure needs, storm drain, sewer, all of that, right? So we're able to have a very good look into what each market looks like, working obviously in partnership with our field, with our FP&A team. We've got access to a lot of different data that helps us to make those decisions. So it clearly is data driven, but it can be as simple as just looking at white space on a map saying we need to be there.
And so this is really tying back to main strategy, which geography is the prime example in this case. And then that determines your priority. You probably narrow it down to a list of 20, 100 companies or so.
We have hundreds of companies in our target database that we are developing relationships with every day.
And then how about continuing that prioritization on that list? Like you mentioned earlier about looking at the culture, looking at their specific situation and what may prompt them to want to entice them to sell the business.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the one challenge with that is it's pretty hard, other than just through sort of relationship in the industry. It's hard to assess culture until you can really get in there and start developing deeper relationships with people, and really until you actually get sort of deeper into the diligence process. We've passed on opportunities that on paper looked good. Financially, it looked good, but strategically, it was not going to be a fit. It's a tough thing to do, but you have to have that discipline to walk away. Even when you're looking at the model and you're saying, man, we could, in theory, generate a pretty solid return here, but you know that's not going to play out when the culture is either toxic or just misaligned with ours. I mean, one of the things that we look for, which is pretty easy to identify in a business owner, do they truly care about the people in their organization? Are they simply just trying to sell to the highest bidder and wash their hands of it and ride off into the sunset? Those are the scenarios where it's usually not a fit for us. And we don't have that often. We've had a great mix of, former owners or leaders in organizations we've acquired that have stayed with us, are still with us, are thriving and growing in the organization. We've also had others that have said, look, I want to work for a 6 to 12 month transition period, and then I'd like to exit, which is fine. We understand that. We can accommodate that as long as we know going in. But we also like to see, and what we usually do see, is they say, I want to stick around for 6 to 12 months. I want to help with the transition for my people. I want to help to leverage my existing customer relationships and transfer those so that those remain more institutional as opposed to leaving when I leave. It's those types of people and those types of leaders that we gravitate towards and where we're most successful in acquisitions, again, versus the ones that are saying, look, I don't really care what you do with my people. I'm going to, cash a check, go sit on the beach, and, good luck running the business. Now, we don't generally encounter something quite as stark as that, but you can get a sense, right, of whether or not people truly care about their legacy, about their people, and it's really manifests in how they treat them. And a toxic culture is not going to fit within Core & Main if it's filtered down into the rest of the organization. Now, the one caveat to that could be if you have sort of one level of toxic leadership and that's going away, and the rest of the people are really hungry and craving an organization like Core & Main where they're going to be valued, they're going to have entrepreneurial opportunity to grow, they're going to have opportunity to, participate in our training programs that we have. We're probably bringing 1,000 people in a year participating in our training programs, whether it's product knowledge or leadership development or communication skills, presentation skills, all of these different things. It's peer-led training that is, I would say, arguably the best in the industry. They're not going to get that at a smaller organization. So you don't always have access to that level, though, right? When you're going through an acquisition.
I was going to say, so you can get this list down to a certain point when you really got to build relationships, I think is the next phase, which is, hey, we got the list of 100, but we can't just assume a bunch of things, assume culture and what their plans are. So that's where we're going to focus on building those relationships so that way we can learn more about their culture, learn more about what their long-term plans are with the business. Teach me how to do that. You're doing something right. I'm going to figure it out by the end of this interview.
Yeah,
or I'm not going home.
Okay, perfect. Well, we can camp out here somewhere. So it really does start with developing meaningful relationships over time, right? And sort of a trusted relationship where, look, they know what the end game is, right? They know our goal is to identify attractive companies that we think will be a great fit for Core & Main, a great mutual fit, right? So private company data in general is very hard to find. We have estimates for financials for every company in our target universe, but they're just that. They're estimates, right? There's not a really high quality data source out there that has private market data like that, as granular as we would like to see. But given our position in the industry, our relationships with our customers, our suppliers, and our knowledge from our field folks, we're able to develop pretty solid estimates for most of those things. So we can also prioritize by size, right? I mean, we've acquired businesses across the size range continuum, but generally, we want to focus on some of the larger, more meaningful players in their geography or in their product category, whatever it'll be. So that's another way to prioritize. And then again, it's really about getting in front of them, staying in front of them, and learning as much as we can about what drives them. If they've got family in the business, if they've got sort of the third generation that is truly active and wants to run the business going forward, those are probably ones that aren't going to be as actionable for us in the near term as the ones where it's, we've got some family in the business, but they don't really want to run it. They kind of want to do something different, and which is fine. We're okay with that. But, so we really don't have a great, succession plan or exit strategy. And those are the scenarios that kind of bubble up for us. And then it's just doing what we can to assess, is that cultural fit? I mean, we generally will know going in what the reputation in the industry is. How do they work with their supplier partners? How do they treat their customers? Are we competing with them? Are they a good, fair competitor? These are all things that we have access and insight into. But as I said, you're never going to get that real close look at the culture until you start digging deeper into due diligence. And again, unfortunately, there's been opportunities we've had to walk away from because the cultural fit just wasn't there.
How do you open up that conversation? It sounds like you're pretty forward that the premise is this conversation to see if there's an opportunity to do a deal.
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody knows that we've been the most acquisitive player in our space, and we don't like to beat around the bush, right? We make it very clear why we're interested in developing relationships with a lot of these players. It's not a surprise. And again, we have people reaching out to us. But for the most part, owners are receptive. I mean, I've been continually amazed at how many owners have just been so receptive, where our close rate on reaching out to private companies, developing a relationship, getting an NDA in place, getting to the table, closing the transaction is remarkably high versus any metric I've seen, particularly private equity, which would not be a fair.
Of those kind of deals versus the typical banked type of?
Yeah, I mean, 75% or more of our closed deals have been proprietary, just a direct one-on-one.
What does it look like on the outreach? Is it a cold email from you? What does that look like?
The great thing is at this point, there's really not anything that's cold because of what we've done over the last 7 years or so, right? Now, certainly initially, as we were building, I mean, the Core & Main name didn't even exist until after CD&R carved us out of HD Supply. We were HD Supply Waterworks at that point. Obviously, people knew we became Core & Main. But yeah, in the early days, there was a lot of cold calling. There was a lot of, hey, I'm going to be in town. Do you mind if I stop in for a visit? Just say hello. We can get to know each other. I love doing that. And there's nothing like an in-person meeting.
That's a good one. That's one I used on you.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to be in town.
Hey, I got suckered in. Jeez. But no, look, it works, right? I mean, there's no substitute for the in-person, face-to-face, really see who you're dealing with, look them in the eyes, and you can learn a lot by
Would
doing
you do that like completely cold on like the early days, right? Nobody's ever heard of us, but hey, I'm going to be in town. We're in the same industry. Can we grab some coffee? You would do that?
Absolutely. And, this is something that goes back even to my Bertram days. We would do the old, look, this is a really interesting company based in, fill in the blank on where they're located. And I don't necessarily have a trip scheduled there, but, reach out and say, hey, look, we're going to be in the area. Would love to get together. Now we got a reason to be in the area. And that works, right? I mean, they're not going to say yes every time, right? But again, because of who we are, our reputation in the industry, our track record of success, if people are even contemplating a potential transaction within, 0 to 3 years, they'll usually be willing to take a meeting. And if it's on the longer end of that range and it's, look, we're not really interested in doing something right now, but would love to meet you guys and learn more about your strategy, how that may look. And a lot of times what we get is, look, we're not ready now, but when we are, you'll be the first call. And that's all we can ask for.
But going back to still keeping early days, not a big name in the market, is it that ambiguous that, hey, I'm going to be in town, just wanted to say hello? Or is it a little bit of, we're just looking at opportunities in the space?
We're looking to grow and, again, fill in the blank on the geography or, the product category. I really think it's been super interesting what you guys have been doing with XYZ. Would love to, to stop by, buy you lunch, learn more about what you're doing. I can share more about, what we're up to. And who knows where it goes from there.
I heard a little flattering there. I like that. Make them feel good about themselves.
Yeah. Some people may call it, the old sandwich approach, but no. We can edit that part out.
Yeah. All right. We'll keep the sandwich method. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's, okay. So I like that. You kind of had that good appeal where it's not too forward, but you're at least giving a bit of a nature of why to meet. We're in the same space. There's some interest here. We have some ideas. Compliment. Hey, we'd love to tell you a little bit about us as well and what we're up to. And then get that meeting going. What are you looking for? Like, how would you outline that first meeting in terms of key things you really want to learn?
I want to learn as much as I can about the culture of the business by really understanding who that owner, founder, leader, whoever it may be, what makes them tick, right? What's key for them? What's next for them? And again, I've certainly had meetings with business owners, and I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing, inherently, but to say, look, I've been doing this for 30 years, 40 years, whatever. My dad, grandfather, uncle started the business. It's all I've known. It's all I've ever done. But now it's time for me to pull the ripcord and ride off into the sunset. And you can take our name off the building. I don't care. Do what you want with it. I want to take my check and I want to go. And again, that's usually not going to be the ideal scenario. I like to hear them say, look, I've done this my whole life. I'm incredibly invested in it. But the most important thing to me is I need to find the right home for my people because I care about what I built. These are, in many cases, literally family, but also figuratively, people that feel like family because they've worked together for so long, they've developed such a close relationship. I want to hear them articulate that in the first 5-10 minutes of our discussion about just a potential acquisition, whatever the timing might be. If it's, again, 0 years to 3 years, if they say, look, when the time is right, I need to find the right home for my people. That's my primary focus. And then the next statement is usually, look, obviously, the economics has to work out, right? No one wants to give their business away. But I can definitively say, without naming names, that we have acquired companies where we were not the high bidder because there was a close cultural fit and alignment, and they felt very comfortable that we would take care of their people and there would be the right home, provide growth opportunities for them. And that's all you can ask for.
So you're trying to learn what may drive them to want to sell or what drivers are there for them to sell, timing of that, what that may look like, the culture, and then potentially some elements of the economics.
Yeah, we usually don't get into economics early on. It's a tough one, right? They'll ask, kind of what multiple range do you pay? And, we've got some kind of general things that we can share. And a lot of times business owners that all they've known is running their business. If it's a waterworks distribution business, they're not as familiar with what an M&A process will look like. So we've got a great sort of packet of information, if you will, that we can present to them or pass on to them that just from start to finish shows what our M&A process would look like. So like, hey, I know you're not ready now, but if and when, here's what you can expect, right? And we've got a very formulaic process that we put in place. It's standardized, it's repeatable, and it's worked 40 plus times for us.
You think that really helps is like having this brochure, let's not call it brochure, but kind of a pitch deck around.
I wouldn't even call it a pitch deck. It's literally it's a process deck that shows a timeline and it shows what happens at each step of the M&A process. And what I decided very early on when I was building out our team and our structure and our process, I wanted it to be, again, very formulaic, process-oriented, and repeatable. So regardless of whether or not there's an investment banker in the process, which I told you generally there's not, we will follow a process where if you're the business owner, we'll have a series of meetings. We determine there's mutual interest. We'll sign an NDA. We'll start by providing an initial request list, 12 to 14 questions, sort of the basic financials, a few other key things. And once we have that, we're able to develop a valuation range. And we will provide a formal written indication of interest that outlines what that valuation range is and a little bit on what the next steps will look like. They'll take that, they'll digest it. In many cases, they'll say, yeah, we're in the ballpark, right? There are obviously cases where they're like, wow, that's not quite what I was thinking because my buddy at the club told me that he sold his business for 10 times and I think I should sell my business for 10 times. Like, okay, well, tell me why you think that. Tell me about his business and tell me about he's got a software business. Okay, well, that's interesting. So you think that's equivalent. I get it. But so generally, for the most part, we find we're in the same range. So we then will ask a series of additional follow-up questions and other kind of 10 to 12 items. 2-week time frame is kind of the target for that. We then take that back, digest it, and come back to the seller with a formal letter of intent with a specific point of value that, again, we've already triangulated around that in the discussions. We will then sign that LOI, grants us exclusivity, and we start our due diligence process in earnest with a goal of completing that in 8 to 10 weeks. Sometimes we get close to that. Most cases it stretches a little beyond that. We are not the bottleneck. Again, we're usually dealing directly with the business owner who's running his or her business, doesn't have necessarily experience with selling a business or the entire M&A process. So it can be time consuming, it can be tough, and they're not going to loop in a lot of their other, leadership team members generally. They're usually working with an M&A attorney, sometimes, they're outside CPA, usually someone internal on the finance team, generally someone like a controller type individual. But it's a lot of work for them to try and run their business and then be responsive to our diligence request in parallel without slowing things down a bit. So what we say is, look, we can work through these responses as quickly and efficiently as you provide them to us. We get some really gung-ho sellers that'll start and say, look, let's do this in 4 to 6 weeks. Like, great, let's do that. We'd love to. And then they start realizing, holy cow, this is a lot to digest. And we have gone through and streamlined our entire sort of diligence checklist and request list across all of our functional areas multiple times, so that we're only focused on the absolute key must-have items in order to get to a signing and a closing of a transaction.
So we have this great meeting and kind of get alignment on these drivers to sell, the timing, the culture, and things like that. They would look good, and then probably an NDA gets signed to get the information.
Yeah, so in some cases, the NDA signed before that sort of first in-person meeting. Some people just like, I'm not going to meet without an NDA. Others, we meet and they say, I wasn't like really thinking about it, but this is interesting. I'm willing to sign an NDA and kind of take that next step. And occasionally that's more of an exploratory process for them. But in the most part, once you kind of get them to that point and they're willing to engage and willing to exchange information, you usually have someone that it's going to move forward, assuming you can align on valuation. And again, that's why we try to get to that part of it very quickly with that indication of interest, just to make sure that we're not wasting their time or our time. If we come out of business with let's call it a $40 to $45 million valuation range, and they come back and say, yeah, I was expecting, 70 to 80. Like, okay. I mean, I'd love to hear them articulate why, and if there's some valid reasons for that. Generally, it's just a misunderstanding of what, businesses like that are trading for currently. But again, we found common ground with 40 plus business owners over the last, 7 years or so. So I think we're pretty good at, really honing in on what the valuation should be and then coming to terms. But, there's certainly business owners that have expectations beyond what someone may pay. We've had businesses where we've sort of parted ways for valuation differences, and then they've come back to us and we've successfully acquired them and everybody's happy.
Are there any industry reports or things like that you could reference and saying, hey, a lot of them are investment banks that publish it, but
yes, there's some decent market data out there. We were talking about at lunch, a company called GF Data that was acquired by ACG. We subscribe there. They've got some pretty good private market data on, across different industries, different size ranges. I have in some cases had to share sort of snippets of that with business owners who've come back and say, look, my business is growing at X, my EBITDA margin is Y, therefore I deserve a 10X multiple. Okay, well, here's some private market data over the last 15, 20 years, and let's focus on the most recent, couple years, and let's look and see where businesses like this have been trading. And if you've got a premium business with, some secret sauce, or, your margin is significantly higher than industry standard and it's sustainable, like, then we can talk about it. But if it's more of a typical business in the industry, there's just going to be that discrepancy in valuation. But again, we've been able to find common ground a lot of times.
Hey, let me come back to that one. On this first meeting, do you have any go-to lead questions just to facilitate that conversation to get to some of those points about understanding their motives to sell or with timelines and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not afraid to ask any question, but I mean, one of the keys is just what do you want to do? What's the ideal scenario for you? I like that one. I like the open-ended questions to get them talking. And I mean, for me, that's the goal in those sit downs, is to have people doing as much talking as possible and me doing as much listening as possible. So it's the open-ended questions that's about their business, it's about their family, it's about their goals and desires. And that gives you a sense sort of holistically of who you're dealing with. But yeah, I mean, understanding what makes them tick, that goes a long way in helping us to understand whether or not that's going to be a good fit for us from a culture strategic standpoint.
I think he just asks a lot of questions out of curiosity, like you were doing with me earlier.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Do you ever convince somebody to sell their business?
This came up in a discussion recently. I don't like to convince people of anything, right? I like to understand what their motivations and desires are. I like to articulate what our goals and our vision are and find common ground and alignment there, right? I mean, I'm not trying to give someone a hard sell, like, you should really sell your business to Core & Main because of X, Y, and Z. I should say, what I do say is, here are the great things about Core & Main that we've been able to develop. As we can trace our roots back to a company that started distributing pipes in the late 1800s, right? So we've got a long, long history. Now, the recent history, here's what we've done. Here's the organization we've developed. Here's the culture we have. Here's the programs that we have on training, on culture, on everything across the board on the training that I mentioned. So here's what it could be like. Here's the product access we have. Here's where we're investing in systems and tools. How does that compare with what you guys are using and how your people are able to grow and develop? And do you have the opportunity to transfer people across different geographies or into different parts of the business? Tell me about how that works. And then they start thinking, wow, that could be pretty cool because we've got some really strong up-and-comers that I think could be great in X, Y, and Z, and maybe we don't have enough opportunity for them, or they're looking for something a little greater than that. And it can be a fantastic way for them to really kind of plan ahead on how am I going to take care of my people by exposing them or joining a company that's got just so much more opportunity than I could ever provide for them on my own.
You guide them to sell their business.
It's better than convincing.
It is. Well, you have the process deck.
We do.
There's a wonderful technology that you use at Core & Main highlighted in your process deck.
This is not a hostage video. I'm speaking of my own free will. We do. We use a product called Deal Room that I believe you're familiar with. Yeah, you should check it out. You may like it, although don't try to get too involved there.
I'll get a beer for Jeff every time someone inquires and mentions Core & Main.
There you go. Yeah, say Core & Main, and then we'll get a discount on our next renewal.
There you go.
So, no, look, I mean, I've used a number of different, what do you want to call it, a deal tracking tool, CRM, pipeline management, diligence, process management, all of the above. I've used a number of different products over the years, and Deal Room, quite candidly, has been a fantastic tool for us from a technology standpoint, a support standpoint, reporting, customizability. It's really met our needs very well. And for me, what I need in a system like that is just what I said, something that's going to be efficient, useful, not cause headaches, not cause problems where it's not functioning properly, the software is outdated, or something just doesn't work when I need it. And we haven't seen that at all with Deal Room. So it makes it very efficient, and it's been a great tool that we're incredibly happy with.
I mean, is that where you're tracking a lot of this activity?
Absolutely. All of it goes in there.
So you got all your pipeline in there, and then as you move through,
we have every interaction with every business owner, management team tagged to each project card in there. If we leave a voicemail message, we may not, put every single voicemail, in there, but every meaningful interaction is logged and recorded. So it's institutional knowledge. It's not just knowledge of a meeting I had or Noel had or Trent or someone else in my team had. It becomes institutionalized. It's part of who we are, and anyone can go access it that needs to see what's the status of XYZ company that we'd love to acquire. When's the last time we met with them? And what are they thinking? We can go in there and say, well, we met with them in March of 24 and we had a really great sit down. They said, we're not quite ready to sell yet, but we noticed you guys have been quite acquisitive. You just bought XYZ company that we know. That was interesting. And you know what? We might be ready to sell in a year or two. And when that time comes, we're going to give you guys a call. Don't worry.
How does that move into like execution? Because I think that's like the thing I heard Deal Room's really good at. But like, does it sort of like naturally flow into it, or like how do you guys use it for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's our own sort of data room, right? I mean, occasionally we'll have a bank process where they come to us with their pre-populated data room, but even in those cases, we take it all and we put it right into Deal Room so that every member of our team, whether it's someone on my M&A Corp Dev team, if it's someone that's on a functional team that's participating in the diligence process, someone on our integration team that's working on integration planning, all of them have access to Deal Room. They have all the data that either we're getting directly from a business owner or that we'd be getting from a banker's data room. It's all populated neatly within that room, specifically within that project card or that sort of deal. And there's one place where everything is very conveniently logged, tracked, and we know where to go. We know how to get it, and it's intuitive. It's user friendly. We've got when we're working directly with the business owner. I think you know this, but we're able to give them access to Deal Room, but only sort of on a seller side, right? They don't have access to any internal notes or anything that we have, but sort of the data room side of it, they've got full access to that, to populate it. They can answer questions in there. So it keeps, again, everything in one spot. It's very easy to track. And we have not had any complaints from sellers. And in fact, really just the opposite. They say, not trying to toot our horn, but that we've got a very thorough process that we're incredibly responsive, incredibly organized, and a lot of that is the tools that we're using, like Deal Room.
Oh, it's nice to hear that. You've tried a bunch of other things, and
we have, and there's some other tools out there that have worked well for us for a while, and we had need to transition for a variety of reasons, and so far Deal Room has not let us down. So
you use that for your pipeline, diligence, integration. Are there any other products or tech that you use to manage your process?
So that's the primary. I mean, there's some other data sources that we would look at. I mean, I mentioned GF data for sort of valuation data, but in terms of kind of just the overall process management, I mean, that's really the bulk of it.
Okay, so got a good tech stack in the back end. We kind of talked through this whole process of market map, through identifying potential targets, building the relationship, getting to the point when you got some clear indicators, there could be a fit there and there's some interest to sell, get an NDA signed, and then we start going through this actual like valuation process. At what point do you build out an investment thesis for this specific deal?
Yeah, so we generally have a pretty good idea, even just going in, right, to even just a first meeting. If you're a business owner in a specific high priority geography, we've probably had that circled for a while. We have probably a pretty good estimate of what the size of your business is. We know where you have strengths from a product perspective or maybe some opportunities. So it's in that case, it'll be very easy to generate the thesis of we would like to acquire XYZ company to grow our presence in this geography and give us greater access to these additional products. Right, and the thesis could be as simple as that, and then we obviously go in and we validate that throughout diligence, right? But our business is not rocket science. There are, some pretty compelling strategic advantages we have with our size and scale and the moat we have around the local knowledge and expertise. You may not know this, but every municipality or virtually every municipality has their own specifications for a fire hydrant, as an example. So. Which is great for us, right? If it was standardized and there was one type of fire hydrant used across the entire United States, there wouldn't be as strong of a need for us. But we've got product on the ground in those local markets, and that's just one example of a product, right? So by having the footprint that we have, the branch network that we have, and the people operating every day in those local markets with the sole focus of solving their customers' problems, that's a pretty strong and wide moat, I would say. So it gives us great comfort in what we built and what we're continuing to build.
So as you move through that process, then you build like a formal investment thesis that you have to get approved or pitched to?
We do, yes. So that was one of the other things that I developed early on, was to make sure we had sort of an investment committee of sorts, which is really comprised of our executive leadership team, of which I'm a member. So there are 8 of us, including our CEO. And we have a formal process where before we submit an indication of interest, we'll either have, a call, a meeting, a Teams meeting, and sort of talk through what the investment thesis is, why we want to move forward. We've got a very straightforward template that we use to present the opportunity. Again, that's sort of standardized so that every acquisition proposal looks the same. And then we talk and we agree to move forward or not move forward. And, for the most part, most of the opportunities that I present or that my team presents, we get agreement early on. And we've always had, at the end of the day, in any acquisition we move forward with, is complete unanimous support and approval for the acquisition. So that's very important. But as we move forward throughout the process, before we submit an LOI, we go back and we have another checkpoint with our executive committee to, again, to make sure, all right, here's what we found since the indication of interest. We've now focused in on a very narrow price point as opposed to a range. Are we comfortable here? Here's the assumptions that we see in terms of how we can create value. Here's how it looks like against our return hurdles. Here's what we expect from a diligence standpoint. Here's the key 5 areas of diligence. In addition to, the hundreds of questions that we're going to ask for every transaction, here's sort of the 5 key risk areas or key value drivers that we need to know and understand in order to test that thesis and validate it.
I just got like 5 more topics we can cover, but I'm gonna be mindful of our time here. I want to dig into okay, you get this initial investment thesis, it's approved, and it sets you up for this IOI stage, which naturally, let's move right into this good old bid-ask spread. I want to pick that up because we talked about that earlier. Sometimes you do have this big gap when you're at like 40, 50 and they're at 70, 80. What has been your approach to bridge that gap?
It's interesting. Every business owner is different. Every transaction is different. The nuances, I always tell people, part of M&A is just problem solving, right? So every transaction that we've worked on has had some issue or some challenge that arisen at some point in the process. And in some cases, that's on the front end on valuation. And it goes back to, again, that relationship we've develop a relationship built on trust, and then asking the questions, right? Like, hey, I hear you. You want max value for your business. If I was in your shoes, I would be wanting the exact same thing, right? This is not a private equity rollover deal. We're going to be buying 100% of your business. This is your one bite at the apple. So you want to do as well as you can. Totally get it. I would be in the exact same position. But let's talk through what you built, what the go forward plan and cash flows look like. Ultimately, that's what it boils down to. I mean, businesses, as you know, are generally valued based on trailing earnings, a multiple of trailing earnings. But what we really care about is the sustainable level of earnings going forward. We also care about the synergies that we bring to the table, which we also don't think we should pay for, right? I firmly believe we should not pay someone for value that we are going to bring to the business after we own it. We should pay them for what they've built and what that looks like to us going forward. So there's generally just a lot of back and forth and explanation. I mean, I can tell you, we've absolutely come in with an initial range where the owners have said, yep, we're in the range. That's where I want to be. I'm like, great. Now it's usually, it's at the top end of the range, but we know how to handle that, right? There's also absolutely, as I said, been situations where we've gone in and they say, man, that is just not what I was expecting. I was looking for X, Y, Z. And then I don't get offended. It's not emotional. I'm not upset by it. I say, okay, I understand that. Let's talk through why that is. And we try to have a very adult conversation based on rational logic and facts. Why do you think your business is worth that?
That's interesting because then you get a sense of how sophisticated they are when they really think about that. I talked to my buddy who's got the software company that got X value, or right. I read this report, or I saw this publicly announced deal that, referenced this. There's that point. I like how your angle is digging into the why, but then are there other levers you use where, hey, we're going to roll over some equity in this deal and there's some potential and growth and value there, or other tools, earnouts?
Yeah. So we have not done any acquisition where we've acquired less than 100%. So that's our model. That's what we do.
Is it always cash?
It is. Yes, it has been always cash. Although, we've had a couple where we've had an earnout, right? So there's, the initial purchase consideration at closing was cash and a small earnout component. We do try to avoid earnouts for the most part. I do think it's a good way to bridge a valuation gap in some cases, but we are very highly integrating these businesses into our existing platform, if you will. So it can be harder to track those. It can get a little messier. It can lead to disagreements down the road that will disrupt what has become a good partnership relationship with the former owner or their team. So not to say we couldn't do it, and we I'm certain we will have future conversations with business owners where we will, insert the idea of an earnout to help bridge a valuation gap. But I try to find other paths forward. And honestly, it's worked out pretty well for us where, again, I don't take it personally. It's not an emotional decision for me at all, right? If I'm talking to a great business, we've got a clear value creation path. We've got a business owner that I really like and respect and think he's built a great team and a culture that I see will align with ours. And if the only difference is valuation, then what we say is, okay, if we're not going to get there now, no harm, no foul. Let's stay in touch. Maybe you'll grow into those valuation expectations, or maybe something else will change in the market, or maybe we'll come back with a different viewpoint at some point, right? We're a public company. We have to be cognizant of where our stock is trading, what our multiple is. We have to be cognizant of economic environment. Are we buying at a peak? Are we buying at a trough? Are we buying at what we think is a sort of a steady state? So all those things come into play. And again, I think I touched on this a bit earlier. We've had discussions where we were, full bore focused on an acquisition and had to fall apart for valuation reasons, throughout the process. And they have then come back to us and we've acquired the business.
You got to know your boundaries and not be afraid to walk away when you need to.
That's exactly right. Again, you cannot be emotional about it. It's incredibly hard to do. We've had fortunately, very few transactions that have fallen apart late in the process. Normally, we can identify these challenges and issues early on. But like anyone in the M&A business, we've had some where, and this is why you perform due diligence, we've encountered issues that were insurmountable, right? And for me, that's the one piece where I don't like to admit something is insurmountable, because for me, I usually think if there's a problem, we can find a solution. But in some cases, there's issues. And an example would be, and we'll see if our legal team wants me to cut this one out, but if we're talking to a business owner and they're selling a significant amount of product through a DBE, a disadvantaged business enterprise of some sort, and that DBE is not performing a commercially useful function, which is the definition that's what's required by law. If it's more of a pass-through, shuffling papers, that's a no-no. And if we encounter that and the fact set shows us that they have not been doing this appropriately, we have to walk away. And we have. And it's unfortunate, but there's no way around that. And
that's
we are going to be above board.
An LOI.
Yes. And again, that's been incredibly rare, but if there's one thing that we do, we do what we say we're going to do, but we also operate with the utmost integrity. And, we have to operate within the bounds of the laws and the regulations, right? And that we cannot compromise on that at all.
And valuation before LOI signed, what are like the good indicators and the red flags that you're really looking into?
So not sure exactly what you're getting at there.
Well, like how you evaluate that company. Obviously, there's a culture fit, and then there's some financials that we want to see in a positive direction. I think that's pretty common, universal to a degree, depending on your expectations. But then is there like just certain things that you just, from experience of doing enough deals of, if I see X, I'm definitely not know early on that this is a deal we shouldn't do?
Yeah, right. So, the DBE piece is certainly one that I mentioned.
Now you know to look for that early.
Yeah, we are sensitive to that, right? So we make sure that we dig in early, and it's not uncommon in our industry, and we sell through DBEs, but they're established companies that are performing a commercially useful function. That's part of the industry. That's part of, what's great about all of American industry, right? Just giving opportunities to those that are, less advantaged in some way, shape, or form to have a meaningful business and, contribute to society. But it's those that are skirting the laws and the regulations where it doesn't fly, right? So that's absolutely one example of that. The financial piece is pretty simple, right? We've got return hurdles that we look at. We've got assumptions that we make on growth. We've got assumptions that we can make on what value we bring to the table through whether it's sort of operational efficiency. We've got great buying programs that there can be a great benefit to companies that we're bringing into the fold. So those are the key things. But the financial piece is one of the most critical. But we have the same approach, I would say, as to just about anyone that's evaluating an investment opportunity from a financial perspective. We put together an investment model. We have our set of return hurdles and we've got our set of different synergies that we can bring to the table. And we evaluate that and we try to stress test it. And we ask, we work in partnership with our operational teams on, all right, this is the plan that we're going to sign up for. Does this make sense, right? Is this assumption on growth? Is this assumption on customer loss? Is this assumption on, shifting or moving around to a different supplier base? Are we comfortable with all of these? And that's an iterative process that, again, involves not just my team, but the rest of our executive leadership team, as well as some of the operational leaders out in the field.
A big part of buyer-led M&A is making sure integration goes well, right? We're not doing the deal just to close. We're doing the deal for it to be successful. How do you do that? Yeah,
that's a great question. And that's one of the reasons why you see, I think you threw out the stat the other day on one of your, either the LinkedIn post or a podcast about 70% of all acquisitions fail or whatever.
It's a fabled number, man. I'm like, who determines what this actually
And I think if you continue the sentence, it's actually failed to meet the expectations that they set out in, sort of their investment thesis or investment model. It doesn't mean it failed and it went to zero or, the business went bankrupt. But we certainly have not experienced that. And part of the reason is we get our integration team involved in the process very early and we start the integration planning. So as soon as we get a signed LOI, we have a separate integration team that rolls up under our finance organization, ultimately to our CFO. So he's obviously involved in every acquisition that we move forward with. But someone on the integration team is involved from day one. They're involved in the calls, they're involved in the meetings. We, as part of our sort of standard formalized process, when we get a critical mass of responses to our diligence requests, we schedule an on-site meeting that generally consists of a day and a half in a conference room in a hotel or something, going through each of the functional areas. We'll have people from our HR team dial in, our IT team, our tax team, our finance team, if we're working with a third-party provider on a quality of earnings analysis. And we'll usually incorporate some sort of a site visit depending on what kind of business it is that we're talking about. If it's just a traditional sort of waterworks branch, we like to see it, but that's not necessarily going to be a key factor in our decision-making process, seeing what their yard and, warehouse looks like. We can see that in Google Maps, but obviously we like to see what we're buying. So we do get there at some point. That on-site diligence meeting is highly critical for a number of areas. Checking our boxes on our diligence request list, but also that interaction with the leadership team, and usually in some cases are looping in a few more team members so we get some access there, get access to that next level of leadership. And our integration team is there and they will spend a couple hours kind of walking through, here's what the future is going to look like after the transaction closes. Here's the sort of laundry list of items that we're going to go through, which it can look like an eye chart, in some cases, but it's not we do all of these things and all of these exact steps. These are the types of things that we are going to be focused on and we're going to work with you on. And it's going to be over, whatever the appropriate time frame is for each individual acquisition. And there's a lot to discuss, but again, not our first rodeo. So we know the various things that we need to look for. We know, if we're going to be talking about an ERP migration, which, we do in cases where it's necessary, right? We talk about that. We talk about the timing for that. And we're not perfect. Nobody is. And do we miss things every now and again, or do we not prioritize something that we look back in hindsight and say, shoot, we should have prioritized that piece of the integration planning so that we hit that one kind of day one. But, we get the vast majority of it right. So that when we do hit that closing day and we own the business, we know the people. We've had relationships with them. And the other piece I didn't really dig into is virtually every transaction that we complete, we will sign the purchase agreement. And then we have an interim period of generally 2 to 4 weeks where we're working on integration planning, but integration planning only, not trying to run the business, right? And then we will close the transaction with that plan in place, ready to go, hit the ground running. Again, we've got those relationships already established. We're starting to develop that level of trust. And then shortly after the closing of the transaction, we will hold a leadership kickoff team led by someone on our integration team, operational leaders who are going to have responsibility for working, overseeing the business and, they'll get together in a room and spend half a day talking through a variety of topics on what it's going to be like working together, prioritizing different aspects of their business, further understanding their culture and customs and what makes them tick, making sure that there are things that they're doing every day that are very important to who they are, that we don't take that away or stop it or significantly change it unnecessarily. The one thing we never say is nothing's going to change, because things will change, right? We absolutely try to minimize the level of change and disruption, but things will change. And, we've had issues in the past where someone's made a comment similar to that, and then we get in there and something changes, and they say, hey, look, that changed. I thought nothing was going to change. And so we try to be very purposeful about articulating, look, things are going to change. It's just a matter of fact, right? That's how things go. But we want to minimize it, and there's going to be a good reason why, and we're going to articulate what that reason is, and we're going to hope that you're on board. And the other big thing we try to do throughout this sort of interim period between sign and close, prepping for the integration, is just ensuring that leadership team, whether it's the owner or whoever's kind of running the business, that the people that are going to look to them for guidance, that they are fully aligned with us on, this is going to be great for the business, this is going to be great for the people, and here's why, right? Not just trust us, but here's why, and here's the benefits that everyone's going to see. We need to be fully aligned on that. Otherwise, it sets you up for failure if sort of the head cheerleader isn't aligned with our go-forward plan.
It's a lot, Jeff. I have a feeling I'm going to have a conversation with either your CFO or someone on the integration team here and continue some of this. What surprises have you seen over the years in deals, be it diligence or integration? Those are always fun things to learn from. Yes.
Well, I don't know that I have anything that's super intriguing. I mean, I mentioned that every transaction is unique. It's a series of problems that need to be solved in order to get to signing and closing, right? But it's just dealing with different personalities. People prioritize things differently. We've had some business owners that wanted to really accelerate a process where it just wasn't possible because, in their view, I've answered all the questions that you've asked of me. I said, yes, you have. You've answered sort of an initial response to each of the questions. And now there's a series of follow-up questions for 40 of those, right? We need to talk through those. And then there's going to be follow-up on those. And so, again, this is nothing that's earth-shattering, but it's important to understand. And this is why we try to articulate exactly what the process is going to look like from start to finish. It will be iterative. We are going to send you a large list of questions, discussion topics. We're going to make it as manageable as possible, but there's going to be follow-up. And that's why they call it due diligence, right? We need to make sure we're comfortable with the investment we're making. We need to make sure we don't really look at it as just checking boxes, right? I mean, sure, that's part of it, but it's really understanding and testing out the investment thesis. Are we getting what we think we're getting? And are we going to be able to sustain that going forward? So I know that didn't really answer your question about something wild and crazy.
I know you got a lot of rocks to look under at the end of the day, and things just.
I will tell you too. I mean, look, we've been fortunate that we've acquired businesses from owners that were forthright. They were running the businesses that they said they were running. They were treating their people the way they said they were treating their people, and for the most part, we've gotten what we thought we were getting, and we've been able to build off that base.
I'm going to reserve that question only for folks that are just retired from corp dev. Because they're the ones that tend to...
I think that's right. Or the non-public company corp dev leaders.
That's true too. I just got a couple of questions about what the future looks like. I know we mentioned technology. One, kudos to you. I think you're ahead of the game. I've noticed this pattern, trying to be as unbiased as possible, but the best in M&A tend to use good technology products like Deal Room.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's incredibly important. Again, the key for us is we want to be on sort of that cutting edge of what's available and what we need to run our process efficiently. But that's the key. It has to be efficient. It has to work within our process. And we just have to be able to rely on it without any second thought. And that's what we've seen, again, with Deal Room, and we're incredibly comfortable there.
So I just want you to kind of close your eyes and imagine 10 years out, what the future of this technology is going to do. My head of product's going to get this recording, by the way.
Wow.
And any things about, we got AI today, but 10 years, AI, there's probably going to be an actual physical robot AI driven M&A bot thing that could do things. So imagination as far as it can go.
Yeah.
Where do you see technology going when it comes to
the good thing, which hopefully gives me some job security, is I don't think the AI-powered robot is going to be able to replace the in-person meeting and the establishment of rapport, the development of that real relationship, and the evaluation of culture and fit.
Unless you're indistinguishable between a real human.
Wow, you're going really, really high tech.
That might be 20 years out.
Yeah.
Let's keep it 10 years out.
Yeah, I guess I maybe should start investing in the robots then, right? I need to be in control of my own destiny. No, look, I do think, automation tasks, anything that's repetitive in the process, reviewing contracts, identifying various risks, that certainly can be streamlined. I look at, even the identification of opportunities, prioritization of opportunities, just sort of synthesizing data that we have already in in a database or in research tools or in, sort of access we have to additional studies and reports, synthesizing all of that into sort of meaningful, actionable data that helps answer questions that we maybe would have to spend too much time today analyzing on our own. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like or how or when, but I think that's probably already happening to some extent, and certainly in the near term could be more so. And again, barring your, super sci-fi oriented future, which I don't know, maybe we'll get there. I go back to the people aspect of it. I'm a firm believer, no matter what we have in terms of technology, you can't replace the people aspect of this. And it's, again, particularly, the business that we're acquiring, even if going forward, more of the people that we're going to be employing are working in different types of jobs than they're working in today, they're still people, right? And we still need to find that cultural fit. We still need to have those relationships. We still need to see eye to eye on what that's going to look like. So, again, we're going to continue to invest in technology. We're going to continue to keep abreast of what the available tools are and how we can best utilize them within our process. But people aren't going anywhere. And we think we got a pretty good team.
I got technology and M&A means less time on tactical crap, more time on strategic value add activity and the real people issues that create value.
There you go. You should have answered the question yourself. That was perfect.
I'm just talking back to you.
No, that was great. It was very
Kisan words. That's all.
I like it. I like that. I'm gonna have to write that down.
And then I guess when you think about that in terms of the role of corporate development evolving, sort of plays into that. And I'm just wondering, even like buyer led, because I feel like I've seen just companies like yours that do a lot of M&A where it is very much buyer led, and you sort of are driving that process. And just like how you gave an example, how your team really gets involved and how they're engaging with that target company, preparing them, what's going to happen after close, before you close. Those are all things are clear indicators of buyer led. Is there anything there that you sort of see that, even your organization would evolve more so in the future?
That's an interesting question. Again, I would think about sort of the target identification or prioritization piece to it. And, as we look to continue to expand into adjacent markets, I think that could be an opportunity as well to help sort of maybe shortcut some of that research analysis. But yeah, again, buyer-led M&A is always going to be about relationships, and bankers aren't going anywhere, I don't think, right? They're going to utilize technology tools. They already are, and they're going to try and streamline their processes, make it more efficient. They're going to try to automate as much as they can. But a one-on-one relationship, person to person, is just incredibly meaningful. And we're going to make that a continued priority, regardless of where technology takes us. So I just don't think you can take the human out of the equation.
Give me my next startup idea, banker robot.
There you go.
Maybe.
Yeah, get me in on the seed stage.
Open. I got to ask every legal department's favorite question. What's the craziest thing you've seen in M&A?
Oh, goodness. I'm not sure I'm going to have a good answer for you on this one. I may have to plead the fifth.
It's because of the public company.
Yeah, I was given strict orders. I was given strict orders on that.
What about a total of PG, kindergarten appropriate?
Oh, man. Trying to think of something pre-Core and Main.
Yeah, nothing to do with Core and Main at all. Jeff's own personal experience here.
Yeah, Jeff's own personal experience. These are Jeff's own words.
Even like funny, like post-close purchases. You got to have something.
Yeah, well, there was one. I don't think this will upset anybody. We bought a business and they had a pet alligator in the back of one of their facilities that they would feed, and it would kind of hang out and like truly live there like a pet. And that wasn't on our diligence list to ask if they had any wild animals roaming around that they treated as pets and fed on a regular basis. And ultimately, when we took over the business, we had to make sure that someone came and took that alligator and took good care of it so that it wasn't going to be disrupting our business.
You put it for adoption.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what happened. There was no harm to this alligator, but there was also no harm to our people, which is a good thing. So, but we no longer have a pet alligator.
Is that part of the list of assets, alligator?
Yeah, it wasn't, or we would have asked about it.
Jeff, this has been an awesome conversation. Thanks so much for taking the time, helping me become a better M&A scientist.
You got it. Thanks for making the trip to St. Louis, and thanks again for lunch. Always happy to chat.
My pleasure. Fellow M&A scientists, you made it this far. I appreciate you. Love to hear from you. If you have some ideas, some feedback, criticism, I'll take it. It's how I get better at doing this. Feel free to reach out to me. Usually LinkedIn's the best way. My inbox is a total mess. I think I got my virtual number is at the end of this as well. So reach out to me. Love to hear from you. Till next time, here's to the deal.